NutriCast.
When we are in that stillness and we become clear around what we actually are, we are then able to export ourselves. We are then able to share what we actually are, the divinity, the power, the love, the presence. We're then able to share that with the world. Right? This is so important because what we are usually doing is we are going out into the world and becoming the things that the world is, and we're sharing that. So we're sharing what we think we are with the world. We're sharing the job, the title, the experience, the lover, the addiction, whatever it is. We're becoming that thing and we're sharing that, thinking that that's what we are with the world. But what the silence and the stillness cultivates is it helps you remember what you actually are, and then you share that instead. You share what your uniqueness is. Welcome, beautiful souls, to Season 2 of the Cosmic Love Antenna with your host, Harrison Ma. I invite you on a mystical voyage from the intellect to the soul, delving deep into the mysteries of love's spiritual essence and its unfolding. This podcast celebrates the peeling back of heart layers, revealing profound lessons, interviews with spiritual seekers, and practices to open your heart to love's infinite wisdom. Good morning, evening, afternoon, loving spiritual beings. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the Cosmic Love Antenna and a spiritual, heartfelt conversation today, a solo-sode with me and myself and all of you beautiful podcast listeners and audience that's joining me live on all the social platforms today. I'm excited to go deep into today's topic, the sacred pathways to healing, exploring 10 spiritual laws. And I'm so excited. I have so much to share on my heart today in regards to this. And it's going to be a deep one, as always. Before we get started, just to set the foundation, as we do here always on the show, if you're joining live today, either on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, I see some of your beautiful faces. Welcome, Holly. Welcome, Monica. If you have comments and questions that bubble up today throughout this chat, please pop them into the comment section on social. I'd love to have you as a part of this podcast. If you are listening on the podcast player, please share this out with a friend, a lover, a family member that you think it can support and help, and leave your love, your feedback, your comments over on Apple and Spotify. That helps me pick shows. When you put them in as reviews, helps me pick topics just for you for upcoming conversations. Okay, let's get straight into it because I have a lot to share on my heart today, and I know it's going to be supportive in all the ways. And again, if you're showing up on LinkedIn or Facebook today, leave your comments down below and I will add your beautiful, beautiful frequency into this chat. So I am going to be exploring 10 spiritual laws. And these laws are, to put very frank, they are universally true or universally applicable. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is if you're moving through any stage of your healing journey and you are looking to illuminate and expand your heart, or illuminate and release pain, or illuminate and let go of fear, each of these laws, tools, you can apply. And I'm going to be very, very straight to the point with you and let you know that I would be very surprised if you weren't familiar with most, if not all, of these laws. The question is, are you applying them? Are you embodying them? Because it's one thing within the spiritual conversation, it's one thing to understand a spiritual law. It's another thing to embody it. And that is really what we're going to be talking about today. How do we embody these spiritual laws? And I'm going to be giving some insights and understandings around them. Okay, so let's get straight into it. The first spiritual law for your sacred healing is the law of mindfulness and presence. And I've written little notes around all of these, and I'll read them to you. So mindfulness and presence is the art of practicing mindfulness and being fully present in the moment. So an individual can release worries about the past or future, reducing stress and promoting emotional healing. So this first one here is very self-explanatory, but I want to go a little bit deeper into it. In my experience, most, if not all, suffering occurs when we attach our identity, who we think we are, either in a future expectation or a past story, a past pain, a past trauma, a past wound. If we can learn to, and I refer to it as your mindfulness muscle. If we can learn to flex our mindfulness muscle throughout our day and come back to the only moment that matters, the present one, we can learn to tap into our presence. And when I say presence, I mean more than the present moment. When I say presence, I refer to the divine presence of the universe, God, source, whatever your higher power is, whatever you refer to it as, your presence is that power. So when we are mindful and we are aware of this present moment, when we release from the future, we detach from the past, we create the opportunity for our present power, our presence of divinity to step forth. And that is a gift we get to share. That is a gift we don't just get to share with ourselves to help us heal, but it's a gift we get to share with all the people we come in contact with. Okay, next up. Next spiritual law here is the spiritual law of forgiveness. Forgiveness is the act of cultivating a forgiving attitude, both towards others and oneself. This can free one from the burden of resentment and promote inner peace. So we could do a whole conversation on the spiritual law of forgiveness. And obviously, we won't today. But what I will speak to is the power of forgiveness in relationship to self. And what I mean by this is it's easy to get lost in thinking that forgiveness refers to you forgiving an outside element, you forgiving a person, place, or thing. As an example, in my story, I've spoken about in the show how as a little boy I went through some traumatic experiences. As a teenager, I was, trigger warning, I was sexually abused. And for a long time, I tried to apply the spiritual law of forgiveness to the outside person involved in my abuse. I tried to apply the spiritual law of forgiveness to the perpetrator of the act, forgiving them for their choices, their actions, their abuse. And do not get me wrong, this does provide some solace. This does provide some relief and healing for you. And Darlene, yes, I see it's resonating in the Facebook chat. But the deepest form of forgiveness, the most spiritual form of forgiveness, in my opinion, the most beneficial and impactful form of forgiveness in your life will always be that of self-forgiveness. How can you give yourself permission to forgive yourself? How can you give yourself permission to forgive the choices and the actions that you made? Right? So I'll give an example. In my experience with the abuse, I was holding on to a lot of stories of victimhood. I was holding on to a lot of emotions of shame, of guilt. So if I was to apply this spiritual law to me, and I very much did, I forgive myself. I forgive myself for holding on to that guilt. I forgive myself for holding on to that shame. I forgive myself for being in the mask or the identity of the victim. This happened to me. So this is the deepest form of forgiveness that we can all apply. All right. Next up, next spiritual law here is the spiritual law of divine compassion. Compassion is the act of embracing compassion for oneself and or others outside of you in empathy, understanding, and connection, leading to emotional healing and stronger relationships. I'll read that again. Embracing compassion for oneself and others fosters empathy, understanding, and connection, leading to emotional healing and stronger relationships. I want to speak about one word within this in regards to compassion, and it's the word empathy. Compassion fosters empathy. When we apply the spiritual law of compassion, one of the deepest aspects, elements that we are tapping into is the ability to feel the heart of another, is the ability to connect into what the other person is feeling, what the other person is experiencing, what the other person is healing from. This is the spiritual law of compassion. We understand that while we are unique, while we have led our life of experiences, we can also understand that if we have had the same life as that person, had made the same choices as that person, had been through the same life moments as that person, we would be in the same boat. We would be moving through the same pain. We would be making the same choices. This is what the spiritual law of compassion is about. Right? Holly, I see your love in the Facebook chat. I receive it, my friend. Thank you for adding that in. So just to wrap this one up here around compassion, how can you apply this in your life? Right? How can you apply this deeper understanding of compassionate empathy to the people that are coming into your world? Instead of judging, instead of reacting, instead of showing persecution onto other people, apply compassion. Let's keep it flowing. The next one's a big one. And I just want to welcome all the new people popping in on the social feeds. I see all of your beautiful faces. And Jacqueline in the LinkedIn chat, I see you there, my friend. Welcome. I just want to read your comment. It's not our fault. We need to forgive ourselves 100%. Alexander, you're saying it takes a lot of practice to be present and even more to forgive, but it's so worth it. Yes, I could not agree more, Alexander. And thank you. Thank you, everyone that's popping in your comments. I appreciate you. All right, let's keep it going. The next spiritual law here for your sacred pathway of healing. And this is a big one. And I think this one will resonate with everyone here today, either live or listening on the podcast. And it is the spiritual law of gratitude. Gratitude is the practice that encourages a positive outlook. It shifts focus from a lack of abundance and helps individuals appreciate the present moment. Gratitude is the art of practicing gratitude that encourages a positive outlook, shifts focus from a lack of abundance, and helps individuals appreciate the present moment. So let's go deeper into this one, because as you can all imagine, this is a deep one in itself. So gratitude, in my experience, not only does it bring us back to the present moment, not only does it shift us from a frequency of lack, but it opens our heart to more love. All of these practices do, to be honest, but gratitude specifically, what it does is when we can apply a grateful frequency, a grateful awareness, a grateful perspective to anything that we have in this current moment, what does it do? How does it make you feel? Is it just grateful? Is it just hopeful? Is it just abundant? Or at a deeper layer, does it help you fall in love? I've noticed when I've applied gratitude to things, experiences, people I have in my life in any current moment, it not just helps me see why I'm grateful for them and have deeper clarity around that, it helps me also see why I love them. When I'm grateful, as an example, when I'm grateful for the support of my father, or I'm grateful for the wisdom of my mother, or I'm grateful for the compassion of a friend, each of those characteristics are also characteristics of why I love them. So the main point here I'm trying to drive home is gratitude is also a superpower, a super tool, a spiritual law that helps you highlight that which you are in love with in your world, right? That which brings you love, that which cultivates love. So if you're looking for more love in your world, one of the deepest pathways to that love is gratitude. Just noticing. And we all will, this is so important to understand. We will always have something to be grateful for. There will never be nothing. There will always be something. And I'll say one more thing here before we move on to the next one. I teach on this podcast in many episodes. If you've been a listener for a while, you've heard me share the teaching around, and I take this from the traditional Vedic worldview, and the Vedic worldview teaches that there is no outside reality. There is just the reality that you create through your individual lens based off your current level of consciousness. I'll say that again. There is no outside reality. There is just the reality that you create through your individual lens of expression based off your current state of consciousness. Put simply, what that means is if your world currently is not what you desire, if your world is causing pain, if your world is causing tension, and it's not what you deserve, then the long-term solution to that is changing the world. The short-term solution, the quickest solution, the most deepest solution is changing your level of consciousness. And how do we change our level of consciousness? We become grateful. We fall in love. Big one there. Jacqueline, happy it's resonating, and I'm grateful for you too, my friend. I love you very much. Okay, let's keep going. I've got so much more here to share. Next up, next spiritual law is number 5. Next spiritual law, sacred law on your pathway to healing is the law of letting go. The law of letting go. This law refers to releasing attachments to material possessions, past traumas, and negative beliefs that thus allow us space for growth, transformation, and healing. The law of letting go refers to releasing attachments to material possessions, past traumas, and negative beliefs that thus allows us space for growth, transformation, and healing. Okay, so another big one here. I'm going to speak about surrender later as another law. I'm going to give a little spoiler there for another one that we'll talk about. But the art of letting go is different. And one of the reasons it's different is it refers to our attachments, as the description described. Attachments to possessions, attachments to traumas, attachments to our negative thinking and beliefs. Right? It's so easy for us to become addicted. I myself fall into this boat. It's so easy for us to become addicted to the identification of what we think we are, i.e., we think we are the things we own, i.e., we think we are our past traumas, i.e., we think we are the negative beliefs that we keep thinking. But we're none of those things. You are the presence of divine love that holds all of them. You are the container of love that holds all of those things. You are the cosmic love antenna that gets to experience possessions, gets to experience beliefs and thinking, gets to experience events, but they are not what you are. So the art of letting go, the spiritual law of letting go, what it deeply refers to is our ability to de-identify by these elements and aspects that we momentarily think we are. We let go. We release. We move on. And as the description describes, we create space. We create space for what? We create space to remember what we are. We create space to transform back into what we actually are. That is what letting go helps us to realize. Okay, next up. Getting me worked up here. Just a reminder before we keep going, I said this at the start, but just to reflect on this in this moment, because we are going deep into these spiritual laws. Remember, these laws need to be embodied. So there is a difference between understanding intellectually what these laws are and embodying them. So I would really encourage you not just to understand what I'm saying, but notice how it makes you feel in the body. Alexander, in the LinkedIn chat, you're asking, but how does one conceive oneself if we are none of that? But how to conceive oneself if we are none of those things? So that's a very good question, Alexander. And what I would say to that is most of these spiritual laws that we've talked about, they bring us back to that feeling of love. as I spoke about a second ago with gratitude. So when we're looking to embody and feel and remember what we actually are beyond the things, beyond the experiences, beyond the beliefs, beyond the traumas, one of the quickest solutions to reacquaint oneself with what we actually are is to notice when we feel in love, is to notice when we feel expanded by love, is to notice when we feel activated by love. That's what we actually are. That's the self beyond the self. That's the self beyond the beliefs, experiences, possessions, etc. Speaking of love, speaking of the self beyond the self, the next spiritual law here is self-love and acceptance. The spiritual law of self-love and acceptance. So I've described this as recognizing and embracing one's worthiness and uniqueness promotes beautiful self-esteem and empowers individuals to heal from emotional wounds. So the spiritual law of self-love and acceptance is recognizing and embracing one's worthiness and uniqueness, promoting self-esteem and empowerment so an individual can heal from emotional wounds. So obviously another big one here. I want to pull out one word to really speak to it. And it's the word of worthiness. What are we loving about ourselves? What are we accepting about ourselves? You could speak to many things, but the deepest truth, the deepest recognition is one of innate worthiness, one of abundant worthiness. That's really what we're loving. That's really what we're accepting. We're accepting that the deepest version of ourselves, the deepest state of love that we are, is full, is enough, is worthy from the start. It never needed to prove itself. It never needed outside validation. It never needed to get the thing done. It never needed to prove itself. That's our deepest form of self-acceptance. And I'll give one example just to highlight how deep this goes. So we live in a culture that I'm sure everyone here recognizes of hyper masculinization. And when I refer to the masculine, I refer to the divine masculine, the overdoing, the getting stuff done, the producing, the ticking off the boxes, the following the steps. All of these are beautiful traits. But our society at large, both men and women, have been pushed into an over masculinization, overdoing, over getting stuff done, over producing. How this connects to worthiness, self-love, and acceptance is this over masculinization and this overproducing often comes from the limiting belief and the forgetting of our enoughness, often comes from the limiting belief of feeling unworthy, often comes from the feeling like we need to get the thing, otherwise we're not enough, otherwise we're not valuable, otherwise we're not worthy. So this law we can apply to this. When we accept oneself, when we apply self-love, we are recognizing and embracing that we have been worthy from the start, that we've been enough from the start, that we have been uniquely valuable from the start. All right, next up. Next spiritual law here is, this is number 7, so a few more here to go. Number 7 is the spiritual law of deep connection to nature. The spiritual law of deep connection to nature. Connecting with nature's rhythms and beauty can offer solace, perspective, and a sense of interconnectedness, contributing to deep emotional healing. Connection with nature is the art of connecting with nature's rhythms and beauty in a way that can offer solace, perspective, and a sense of interconnectedness, contributing to emotional healing. So, I love these laws. We could take each of these and just do a whole conversation. And this is yet another one. Okay, so I want to speak about this. I just want to acknowledge the beautiful Monica, self-love. I share about this so much. Letting go and self-love come together. Yeah, I agree, Monica. Thank you for adding that in. So, nature and the connection to nature. I want to pull out once again a word. Nature helps us cultivate a sense of interconnectedness. To me, that is where this spiritual law really hits the ground running. One of the biggest illusions is one of separation, not just separate to people, not just separate to our family, our friends, our lovers, but the illusion of separation in relation to the natural world, to the earth, to the animals, to nature at large. One of my favorite definitions of being spiritual, is a remembrance of our connection to a greater whole. And that is really what this spiritual law of nature connection helps us to experience. I'll just share my own experience with this. I often find it easy to fall under the emotional pain, emotional trauma, emotional dis-ease connected to loneliness, connected to isolation, connected to the feeling of I am alone. One of the quickest ways that I overcome this illusion, overcome this pain, overcome this deep tension is by immersing myself in nature, but not just going for a walk and being in the sun. Those things work, don't get me wrong, but going a little bit deeper. One of my favorite meditation practices is connecting to the earth heart. I refer to it as the earth heart chakra. And this is the heart of Mother Earth that we are inextricably and always linked to. Connecting to that earth heart, feeling her support, feeling her grace, feeling her groundedness, and thus reminding ourselves of our constant link to her. Right? I'll keep explaining this here. It's so easy for us within the spiritual community to talk about soul contracts and soul family in relation to other people. And again, beautiful. Those things are real, they exist, and we need to have those discussions. But what I see less discussion around, and what needs to have more insight and more value and perspective on, is our soul contract and soul connection to the earth heart, to the soul that is Mother Earth. When we connect to her, when we remember that we are in a divine union with her, it at the least helps us to remedy our loneliness, our isolation, our feelings of being separate. And at best, it helps us remember one of the reasons we're here. What we're here to step forward with her in unity. Just like we're here to step forward with the people that we love in our world. Okay, keep it flowing. Next up, next spiritual law here is, and I just want to honor the beautiful Rose and Holly in the Facebook chat. Thank you for adding in. Darlene, you're talking about the law of nature. I would love if you would do a podcast on the spiritual law of nature. The animals are such beautiful beings grounding into the earth, all of these things. Yes, I will add it to the list, Darlene. I think you're onto something, my friend. Okay, next spiritual law is, this is number 8, the spiritual law of inner silence and stillness. The spiritual law of inner silence and stillness. This is the art of cultivating inner silence through practices like meditation and reflection that can lead to self-discovery, clarity, and inner peace. So the spiritual law of inner silence and stillness is the art of cultivating inner silence through the practice of meditation and self-reflection that can lead to discovery, clarity, and inner peace. So this law goes really well with mindfulness and presence, but it differs in the way with the emphasis on silence, with the emphasis on cultivating a quiet space, not just externally, but internally. This is important for many reasons, but mostly because if you're like me, you live in a very loud world. You live in a very busy world across all spectrums, across all senses. It's very loud. What we also notice in this loud world is in that busyness, like we talked about before with attaching ourself, our what we think we are, within the busyness of all the things, we also externalize what we are. I call it the externalization of the self, but a way to describe that is we get lost in the fact that we think we are all of the busyness, all of the things. One of the ways to detach and move through that is by cultivating silence, is by cultivating stillness. This is why this law really underlines the necessity and the practice of meditation. That is what meditation does. It's not about following a certain voice or connecting to your chakras or doing certain breathwork techniques. All of those are secondary. The main role that meditation should fill in your life is creating space in your day in which you sit in silence. Right? And with all the love in the world, I say this to myself and all of you listening, there is no judgment or pressure or expectation for you to do that. You can continue to be busy. You can continue to be in the loudness. You can continue to be within all the things. But if that becomes your life, suffering and pain will continue because you will end up in this cycle of forgetting what you are, forgetting what your natural state is. And that is what silence, and specifically stillness, helps us to become clear around. And the last thing I'll say with this is, when we are in that stillness and we become clear around what we actually are, we are then able to export ourselves. We are then able to share what we actually are, the divinity, the power, the love, the presence. We're then able to share that with the world. Right? This is so important, because what we are usually doing is we are going out into the world and becoming the things that the world is, and we're sharing that. So we're sharing what we think we are with the world. We're sharing the job, the title, the experience, the lover, the addiction, whatever it is. We're becoming that thing, and we're sharing that, thinking that that's what we are with the world. But what the silence and the stillness cultivates is it helps you remember what you actually are, and then you share that instead. You share what your uniqueness is. And that's powerful. Right. So, which leads me into the second last law here, which flows beautifully onto what I was just saying, right? Working out what we actually are. The next spiritual law on your pathway, your divine sacred pathway to healing, is living, the art of living with purpose, the art of connecting with purpose. So what I wrote about this is, the art of living with purpose is discovering and living in alignment with one's true purpose in a way that can bring a sense of fulfillment and direction, aiding in healing and personal growth. The spiritual law of living with purpose is discovering and living in alignment with one's true purpose in a way that can bring a sense of fulfillment and direction, aiding in healing and personal growth. So I want to continue this law from what I left it with that inner silence, with that reconnection to what we are. That is your main purpose. I'm going to break this down into a primary and secondary purpose. The primary purpose is the remembering of your divinity. The primary purpose is the realignment and the reconnection to your abundant state of potential, of divinity, of godliness, of universal source energy that you have been from the start. That is your main purpose. But we don't want to just be in that state. Way that we can describe this is that not all of us, most of us, aren't here to be the monk on the mountain that is in the samadhi experience in the cave with no connection to the world. And don't get me wrong, that monk on the mountain could do a lot of visualization work and impact the world through their intentional inner voyages. But if you're like me listening, you're here to impact the world in a more 3D tangible way. And this is where we come into our secondary purpose. Our secondary purpose comes from the inspired and the downloaded and the overspilling of our divine cup. Once we have remembered, reconnected, realigned with our divine source, we then step out into the world in inspired action. right? We then step out into the world in that state of divinity, in that state of potential, in that state of, I would refer to it as loving presence. And that is us living with purpose. This will look different for all of us because we're all unique. But it's an inside job. It's an inside out conversation, not an outside in conversation. All right. And then last up here today, the last spiritual law for all of you to sit with and meditate on and embody today. And Jacqueline, I know it's your favorite, my friend. Happy it's impacting you and resonating. Okay, the last spiritual law here to share with all of you today, to embody, to connect into is, and I told you I'd come back to this one, the spiritual law of surrender and trust. The spiritual law of surrender and trust. So what I've described around this one, this is the art of letting go of the need to, this is a big word here, letting go of the need to control outcomes and placing trust in a higher power or the universe that can help us alleviate anxiety and promote a sense of surrender, healing, and transformation. So the art, this spiritual law of surrender and trust, is letting go of the need to control outcomes and placing trust in a higher power or the universe that can help us alleviate anxiety, promote a sense of surrender, and healing transformation. So I think this is a beautiful law to finish with because it really helps us to release all expectation and pressure on oneself. One of the reasons we control in our world is because we're in fear of losing something. One of the reasons I have placed control on my external experiences, relationships, healing journey is because deep down I fear something will happen. I fear I will lose something. I fear I will become something. I fear I will, insert. When we surrender and trust, we are acknowledging that we can release the fear. Not only can we release the fear, but we are more than the fear. Right, as Rumi says, you have more love in you than you can possibly imagine. And when we let go of control, when we surrender and trust, what are we trusting? We're trusting a higher power. What is that higher power? That higher power is a frequency of love. That higher power that is already you, right? This is another illusion that I share with all of my beautiful religious listeners tuning in. That higher power, that trust that you are surrendering to isn't something that's outside of you. You're not sacrificing yourself to an outside force. You are surrendering and trusting the force of divine love that is in your heart. You are surrendering and trusting and remembering that you never needed to control anything. All you needed to do was trust the divine presence of love that you are and take the step. Right? Jacqueline, you're saying that's a hard one. Trusting the universe has your back and is guiding you for the best thing. It's hard, Jacqueline. I'll just speak for myself. It's hard because we have all of these expectations and stories around what we think should be unfolding, what we think should be happening, what we think should be moving around us and through us. But what I've applied to this is as soon as we get out of our own way and remember that what we think is infinitely less than what our divine source, our divine power, our divine frequency of love knows, then we can trust. Then we can surrender. Because let's say one more thing to this, right? If we stay in that control box, if we stay in that fear box, in many ways, where is that coming from? Right? It's coming from a desire to stay safe. It's coming from a past trauma, a past wound, because we have programmed ourselves, conditioned ourselves that if we leave that box, if we leave that fear container, we will be hurt again. We will be in pain again. But in that moment, if we can approach that pain, we can approach that fear, we can approach that concern with love, then suddenly the borders of that box become permeable. The borders of that box become apparent. And the image that I get is they become clear. There becomes a step to take. So, some big teachings here today, some big lessons. And I hope it hits your heart. I hope it has expanded you today. Before I finish and wrap up here, I want to remind everyone, I say this with all episodes, but particularly with this one, please don't intellectualize these teachings today. Don't just intellectualize. Embody them, right? Take action on making practices around these teachings. And ask yourself, how can they become instrumental throughout your flow of your days? How can they become instrumental as practices, as devotional practices to self? That's how they change your world. That's how they become impactful. All right, beautiful beings. I want to thank everyone that's joined me live today on LinkedIn and Facebook. Thank you for your beautiful comments and your questions and your feedback. I appreciate you. If you're listening on the podcast, if this hit your heart today, please share this out far and wide with a friend, a family member, a lover. But regardless, until next time here in the show, I send you love, I send you light, and I'll see you again very soon. Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Meagher, Meagher spelled Meagher. Sending you so much love.
Step inside the marketing mirror to uncover marketing secrets, discover gems, tactics, lessons, and campaigns you can use, next gen or fundamentals. Grab the marketing magic to improve your marketing and win more business.